Week 14 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units I look to drop this week. The first one, the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers here, they were a 1 week use only versus the Chicago Bears, and they had a mediocre ball game, and now going on bye week here in week 14. And then I know they got a good matchup versus the Rams, but then after that, Miami and Minnesota coming up. So the last couple weeks here for Green Bay, week 10 versus Dallas, 28 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 wins. Week 11 versus Tennessee, 27 points allowed, 3 sacks in the Ninto. And week 12 at Philly, 40 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. At week 13 at Chicago, 19 points allowed, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and a block kick. So that 1 week only use, it was a decent game with 9 fantasy points. But right now, going on bye week here is Green Bay. Their defense, I wouldn't want to stash this week on my roster, and I would drop them this week. The next defense, the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns here, I mentioned them last week as a top waiver wire pickup at the defensive position. And a team is a 1 week only use, and they came up with a monster fantasy game. The number 1 performance of the week 13 at Houston. But the last few games before that, week 10 at Miami, 39 points allowed, a sack. Week 11 at Buffalo, 31 points allowed, 2 sacks. Week 12 versus Tampa Bay, 17 points allowed, 3 sacks. And then week 13, like I said, it was a great matchup. Houston can't move the ball or do anything. 12 points allowed, 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 touchdowns, a return touchdown. So over 30 fantasy points for the Browns in that game. But this week here, tough matchup versus Cincinnati. Then they got Baltimore coming up. So the next couple weeks, they're not really a defense I would look to use, and I would drop them this week in the third and final defense DST unit I look to drop here is the Washington Commanders. So the Commanders here, they've been an up and down unit this season, but right now they're going on bye week. And then they got the New York Giants and the 49ers coming up. Even though those matchups are pretty decent, they're not a defense I'm looking to stash on my team, especially this week with a few more bye weeks, and especially with a lot of free agents out there at the defense position that could do a good job. Week 11 at Houston, 10 points allowed, 5 sacks, 2 windows, and a touchdown. Week 12 versus Atlanta, 13 points allowed, an interception and a sack. And week 13 at the Giants, they did a decent job in that game. Was his commander team, 20 points allowed, 4 sacks, and a fumble recovery. So right here, they run by week, and then they got the Giants once again in Washington in week 15 on Sunday Night Football. So maybe you could revisit them in a week or two. Here's Washington, but right now they're just not that great of a defense. Now I'm going to stash them. So that's a few defense DST units I look to drop here for week 14 of the fantasy football season.